Have you ever believed that even in the harshest corners of the wild, miracles can happen? What if I told you that deep in the Arctic silence, in one of the coldest and most isolated places on Earth, something extraordinary took place, something that no one could explain, something that would change how we see animals and ourselves? This is not just another story. It's a real, emotional, and deeply mysterious event that left an entire community speechless. A story about survival, instinct, and a bear's cry for help in a way that no one had ever seen before. Welcome to Utqiagvik, Alaska, the northernmost town in the United States. Here, life is defined by snowstorms, endless nights, and temperatures that can freeze breath in midair. The people of this town are resilient, Inuit descendants who have lived in balance with nature for generations. They know the wildlife. They respect the land. But nothing could have prepared them for what was about to happen. It was a Monday morning like any other, or so they thought. The first teacher arrived at the local school just after sunrise, though the sun, as usual during Arctic winter, hadn't really risen. A pale blue twilight bathed the frozen landscape. It was bitter cold, 42 degrees C. The wind howled softly across the snow-covered buildings, muffling all sound. But something felt off. She stopped at the entrance, her breath catching in her throat. The snow outside the main doors had been disturbed, and not just by the wind. There were tracks, large, unmistakable bear tracks, fresh, deep, leading straight to the front steps of the school. Now, this wasn't completely unheard of. In rare situations, polar bears, or even grizzlies pushed north by climate shifts, had wandered into human territory. But here's where it gets chilling. The tracks didn't just appear and vanish. They didn't circle the school. They led straight to the entrance, stopped, turned around, and disappeared into the tundra. There were no signs of aggression, no broken windows, no damage, but there was something else. The staff checked the school's security footage. What they saw made their blood run colder than the snow outside. Just past 3:47 a.m., a large brown bear, likely a female, approached the school. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't hunting. She walked slowly, methodically, almost deliberately. And in her mouth, barely visible against her thick fur, was something wrapped in a tattered piece of cloth. She set it down carefully at the top of the school's wooden steps. Then she looked at the door and walked away. When the staff opened the door to investigate, they found it. A small injured bear cub, barely breathing, shivering, and half-conscious. Its front paw was swollen and bloody. There were signs of deep exhaustion. But what shocked everyone was the cloth. A piece of worn human-made fabric, like a blanket, had been wrapped loosely around the cub. It wasn't torn from the mother. It had been placed there. Had the mother done this? Had she tried to protect her cub by seeking out human help? This question would ignite both a scientific debate and a spiritual one in the small, tight-knit community of Utqiagvik. Elders recalled ancient stories, Inuit legends of animals communicating with humans in times of crisis, tales of spirit bears, of mothers who would sacrifice everything to save their young. But never in recorded history had something like this happened on camera. In the footage, the bear didn't hesitate. She didn't test the area or look for food. She came with a purpose. She left without fear. And now, a helpless cub was lying at the doorstep of a school, trembling from cold and pain, wrapped like a gift. Or maybe a plea. News spread fast. People from nearby towns, rescue organizations, and wildlife behaviorists couldn't believe it. Experts rushed to examine the footage and analyze the situation. But the more they studied it, the less they could explain. There was no food in the area, no scent trails. The school wasn't near any known bear den. And that cloth? It wasn't from the school. It was as if the bear had carried her cub through the snow and wind, knowing she couldn't go on, hoping someone else might. What makes this moment unforgettable isn't just the footage. It's what the event revealed about animal intelligence, maternal instinct, and the mysterious bridge between wilderness and humanity. This wasn't survival instinct as we know it. It wasn't fight or flight. It was something different, something intentional, emotional, human almost. And for the people of Utqiagvik, it changed everything. Because on that morning, standing before a fragile creature left by its mother in a final act of hope, the town was no longer just a remote village on the map. It became the center of a question bigger than science. Can animals trust us, even when we've given them every reason not to? And if they can, what does that say about us? But before we get to what happened next, before we unravel the full story of this bear, her cub, and the decision that would spark an international outcry, let me take you deeper into the heart of this Arctic town, where silence is sacred and the snow remembers everything. To truly understand the weight of what happened that morning, we need to step into the world where it all unfolded, a place where the line between survival and surrender is razor thin, and where every heartbeat is a victory against the cold. Utqiagvik isn't just another town on the map. Formerly known as Barrow, it sits at the top of the world, the northernmost point of the United States. With barely over 4,000 residents, this Arctic outpost is more than a town. It's a living testament to human endurance, cultural memory, and a delicate alliance with the wild. Here, the sky is different. In the heart of winter, the sun vanishes for months, and the only light comes from the moon reflecting off vast blankets of snow. The silence isn't empty. It hums with stories, with the whispers of the land, the wind, the ancestors. Life in Utqiagvik is slow, intentional. People don't rush. They listen to the land. The Inuit community, whose traditions go back thousands of years, pass down not just knowledge, but reverence. They speak of animals not as beasts, but as spiritual kin. In every home, every school, every gathering, the balance between humans and nature is not just discussed, and it is lived. And yet, even in a place so deeply connected to the animal world, nothing could prepare them for a bear knocking at the door. To outsiders, it's hard to grasp how far removed this village is from modern chaos. There are no highways. Supplies come by barge in summer or by plane during the long winters. The nearest city with a hospital is over 800 miles away. What they lack in convenience, they make up for in resilience, community, and intuition. People here know how to read the signs in the snow, how to predict weather by watching the birds, how to sense danger before it arrives. But that morning, even the elders were speechless. The school where the cub was found is one of only 2 educational centers in town. It's simple, functional, and built like a fortress, not for style, but survival. Thick insulated walls, emergency generators, and reinforced doors stand guard against the brutal Arctic winds. Inside those walls, every student learns not just math and history, but how to survive a blizzard, how to treat frostbite, and how to respect the land they walk on. They're taught that every animal, especially the Nanook, the bear, is more than just a creature. It's a teacher, a protector, sometimes even a messenger. So when those paw prints were discovered, there was no panic, only awe. People whispered old legends of bears that guide lost souls, of mothers who choose love over instinct, and of times when animals come not to attack, but to ask for help. And suddenly a small Arctic school became the setting for something ancient, and yet entirely new. The cloth the cub had been wrapped in was analyzed. No one recognized it from the town. It wasn't from the school, and it wasn't torn or accidental. It was tied, not tightly, just enough to keep the cub warm, enough to show intent. And that's where the mystery deepened. In a place where nature and humans walk side by side, how did this moment blur the boundary completely? Was this a cry for help from an animal? A calculated act of surrender? Or something else entirely? Wildlife behaviorists offered theories. The mother was injured. She was starving. She had no choice. But none of those explanations aligned with what the footage showed. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't limping. She wasn't being chased. She was calm, focused, present. The Inuit elders said it best. Sometimes the world of spirits and instincts touch for just a moment, and in that moment, something greater speaks. As the story spread through the village, and then far beyond it, something began to shift. People around the world started asking the same question. What do animals know that we don't? And if a bear can choose trust over fear, what else might be possible? In the days that followed, experts flew in. The media called. But the people of Utqiagvik didn't seek fame. They knew this story was sacred. The cub was now under watch by local veterinarians and environmentalists. The school had been temporarily closed, but something more profound had opened. A door between species, between survival and compassion, between instinct and empathy. And that's why we're telling you this story, because it's not just about a bear cub. It's about the choice to believe, even in the most impossible moments, that life has meaning, even in the coldest of places. That instinct and emotion are not enemies. That wildness does not mean heartlessness. It's about one quiet act under a frozen sky that reminded the world, we are not alone on this planet, and we never were. So if you've made it this far in the video, it's because something inside you recognizes this. You believe that animals feel, that they protect, that they hope. And you want more than just facts, you want to feel. If this story already stirred something inside you, you're exactly where you need to be. Subscribe to this channel, not just to follow more unbelievable rescues, but to witness the extraordinary ways that humans and animals find each other. Every story we tell is a window into a truth the world forgot, and you're invited to see it. Now let's return to that frozen morning, to the cub, still trembling, and to the question no one could yet answer. Why did the mother bear come to them? And what would happen next? The cub was barely moving. As the school doors creaked open, the cold wind rushed in and a hush fell over the few staff members who had gathered. No one spoke. No one knew what to say. In front of them, lying curled against the wooden steps, was something they had never expected to find at the entrance of a school. A baby bear, injured, shivering, eyes half closed, wrapped loosely in a faded, torn blanket. It was surreal. The wind howled across the tundra as if whispering the warning they had missed. The cub's breathing was shallow. Its tiny chest rose and fell in uneven bursts. One paw was twisted unnaturally beneath its body. Blood darkened the snow beneath it, and a faint whimper escaped its throat, more like a cry of exhaustion than pain. They moved quickly, instinctively. The school nurse, who had only just arrived, bent down without thinking, forgetting, for one moment, all the rules about wildlife. She cradled the cub in her arms as if it were a child, and in that moment nothing else mattered. They rushed it inside. Within minutes, they had placed the cub in the warmest room in the building, wrapped it in clean blankets, and radioed the town's only veterinarian, who also happened to be the mayor's sister. Her name was Dr. Anaya Sikuk, a gentle, firm woman in her early 60s who had grown up respecting both science and ancestral wisdom. When she arrived, she didn't say a word. She just knelt beside the cub and pressed her ear gently to its side. "He's weak," she whispered, "but he's fighting." The room was silent. The hum of the generator, the ticking of the wall clock, and the soft, rhythmic pulse of something so fragile, but alive. Then came the questions, all at once. How did he get here? Was it the same bear seen on the cameras? What happened to him? And why in the world would a wild animal, a mother no less, deliver her cub to humans? The footage was reviewed again and again. The cameras had caught everything. The large bear walking with steady purpose through the storm, the bundle in her mouth, the gentle way she placed it on the steps, the way she lingered just for a moment, looking directly at the door, before disappearing into the icy darkness. There was no aggression, no confusion, no signs of panic, just intent. And that blanket, it had color, worn patches, stitching. It was clearly man-made, but old. It looked almost ceremonial, something passed down, used for many winters. It didn't belong to anyone at the school, and no one in town had reported anything like it missing. It was, in every sense, a gift wrapped in mystery, but the gift came with complications. Some community members were concerned. A wild bear, even a cub, was still dangerous. What if the mother came back? What if more animals followed? What if this was a trap, not an offering? But others, especially the elders, saw it differently. This was not just nature. This was something sacred. One elder, Utqiagvik, spoke that evening in the town hall. He stood slowly, wrapped in a fur-lined parka, his hands trembling slightly, not from age, but emotion. "I have seen many things in my time," he said. "But this? This is not a mistake. It is a request. A bear has given her child to us, not because she is weak, but because she believes we are strong." The room was quiet. People shifted in their seats, uncomfortable, not because they disagreed, but because they didn't know what to do with that truth. That night, no one slept well. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows of every home. The snow fell heavier. But inside the school, in that small warm room, the cub slept. Its breathing steadier now. Every few hours, someone checked on him, brought water, adjusted the blanket, whispered. And somewhere not far away in the vast Arctic darkness, a mother bear was out there, waiting, watching, or perhaps already gone. By morning, the story had spread. The local radio station aired an emergency update. Wildlife agencies from Anchorage contacted Dr. Anaya. The footage was quietly shared with researchers, and just like that, the tiny town of Utqiagvik found itself at the center of an international mystery. Journalists wanted in. News vans began requesting clearance. But the town, unified in quiet protectiveness, refused. This wasn't a spectacle. This was personal. For the people here, it was more than biology. It was belief. What would drive a bear, a creature of solitude and strength, to walk into a human settlement, bypass every natural instinct, and entrust her child to the very species that has threatened hers for decades? It wasn't just unnatural. It was impossible. And yet, it happened. The cub survived the first 48 hours. His paw was treated. He drank small amounts of milk. He cried once when someone closed a door too loudly, but mostly he slept. He seemed at peace, and the town watched over him like guardians. The school was closed indefinitely. The staff converted the storage room into a temporary recovery area. The kids made cards with drawings of bears and hearts. One note, written in a child's careful hand, read, "Dear bear baby, your mama is very brave. We will take care of you." But behind every act of kindness, there was a shadow of worry, because no one knew what would come next. Would the mother return? Would the cub recover fully? Would the world accept that what happened wasn't a fluke, but a moment of trust between species? And would the world even believe it? All they knew was this: something had shifted. The silence of the Arctic had been broken, not by violence, not by fear, but by a choice. A mother's choice to let go, to hand over, to hope. And in doing so, she left a question no one could yet answer. What are we supposed to do when the wild reaches out to us first? By the third day, the town was no longer calm. The cub was stable, eating small portions, and sleeping more soundly. But around him, tension grew, not because of what he had done, but because of what his presence represented. At the heart of it was a growing divide, a question that no one could answer, and yet everyone seemed to carry like a weight on their chest. Did they have the right to intervene? Some voices, quiet at first, then louder, began to rise in concern. What if we're interfering with nature? What if the mother comes back and can't find him? What happens when the cub grows and forgets we tried to help? What if this is the beginning of something worse? Others, especially those connected to the land through generations of hunting, survival, and storytelling, felt a deeper sense of duty, a moral, even spiritual pull. "He was brought to us," said Malia Konik, a midwife and elder respected by the community. "This was not by chance. If we walk away from this, we're not just turning our backs on a cub, we're turning our backs on what makes us human." That word, human, kept echoing in meetings, over dinners, even during walks through the snow-covered streets. What does it mean to be human, and when the wild asks you for help? The town council held a closed meeting on the matter. Wildlife regulations were clear. Interfering with wild animals, especially protected species like bears, was only permitted in cases of direct threat or documented suffering. But what if that suffering had already happened, before anyone saw it? Dr. Anaya had submitted her report. The cub had a broken metacarpal, mild internal bruising, and signs of extreme exhaustion. The injury didn't look recent. It looked sustained, as if he had been struggling for days. Maybe even dragged, carried through snow and ice. His weight was dangerously low for his age. Survival without intervention was highly unlikely. The decision was made, quietly, but with heavy hearts. The cub would remain in town, under surveillance, until a specialized rescue team could arrive and transport him to a rewilding center further south. The next day, an emergency helicopter was requested, but wouldn't arrive for another 72 hours due to extreme weather. Whiteout conditions blanketed the region. Even satellites showed nothing but fog and ice. So the town did the only thing it could do: wait. And as they waited, stories resurfaced. Tales passed down through oral tradition. Of bears who protected children, foxes who guided hunters home, and a legend rarely spoken aloud. The story of Utqiagvik, the bear spirit who only appears when the world forgets how to care. To some, it was just folklore, but to others, it was explanation. Inside the school, the cub began to show signs of alertness. His eyes opened wider. He responded to gentle sounds. He flinched less. His breathing deepened. One afternoon, he licked the fingers of a young girl who had been allowed to sit nearby. The girl didn't scream. She cried. She had lost her father in a hunting accident the year before. And when asked why she was crying, she said, "Because I know what it feels like to be left behind." That moment was shared around every dinner table. It broke people open. And yet, there were still those who questioned the emotional spiral the town was diving into. Not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Fear that helping this cub meant changing the balance. That too much emotion could cloud judgment. That a town shouldn't become emotionally attached to a wild animal. That the next time, it might be a grizzly, or worse. Some argued that the bear's behavior was not a miracle, but a symptom of climate change. That loss of habitat had driven the animal closer to human territory. That desperation was the only instinct at play. But if it was just desperation, why the blanket? Why the doorstep? Why the school? And why, in all the bear's actions, was there no sign of panic, fear, or violence? Dr. Anaya spoke publicly for the first time at a community gathering on the fourth night. She stood beside the projector showing a still image from the surveillance camera, the one that showed the moment the bear looked directly at the door. She didn't run. She didn't growl. She didn't paw at anything. She just placed him down, looked, and walked away. You don't have to believe it was spiritual. You just have to ask yourself, what does that mean? The room sat in silence. Even those who had expressed the most caution said nothing. Because deep down, beneath the scientific theories and the fears about legal consequences, something unspoken had begun to bloom in all of them. Responsibility. Not just for the cub, but for what they would become if they turned away. So they didn't. They kept feeding him, watching over him. They whispered to him in the night. The children sang lullabies in soft Inupiaq. The elders placed charms near his bed, not to ward off danger, but to welcome peace. And each time they opened the door to check the snow, they wondered if she would return. The mother, the one who had chosen hope over instinct. Somewhere she was still out there. Or perhaps not anymore. But her choice had already rewritten the rules. Because if a creature of the wild, governed by nothing but survival, could see something in humans worth trusting, how could humans do anything less in return? Now we turn this story to you. What would you have done if you were there that morning? Would you have taken the cub in or left nature to decide? We want to hear your heart, not just your opinion. Share in the comments. What would your choice be? She stood by the window, watching the snow swirl like a curtain of ghosts across the schoolyard. The room was quiet, but her mind wasn't. Siku Aniak, principal of the only school in Utqiagvik, daughter of a fisherman and granddaughter of an Inuit storyteller, had never expected her life to come down to this, making a decision that could ignite either healing or ruin. In her hands, she held a radio. It buzzed softly with static, updates from the approaching storm, news from the wildlife agency, concern from the town council. But she barely heard it. All she could hear was the soft breathing of the cub in the next room. He was sleeping, finally, wrapped in a newer blanket now, warm, safe, for the moment. But how long would that last? Siku had always believed in rules. She ran her school with structure and consistency, respect for boundaries, discipline, safety. The Arctic, after all, had no room for carelessness. But this was not in any handbook. No policy covered what to do when a mother bear delivers her cub to your door. The Wildlife Agency had been clear. Keep distance. Observe only. Do not humanize. Do not interfere. But it was too late for that. She had already held the cub, looked into his eyes, felt the tremor of his fear. And now, she was expected to do what? Step away? Close the door? Let nature take its course? Siku turned from the window, walked down the corridor, and opened the door to the converted recovery room. The cub stirred slightly. His paw was bandaged, his fur gently brushed. A local volunteer sat near him, humming an old lullaby. Siku stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then she whispered almost to herself, "If it were a child, no one would ask me to walk away." Her words hung in the air like a challenge to the silence. And that was the truth, wasn't it? If a baby had been left on those steps wrapped in a blanket, bruised and bleeding, would anyone hesitate? Would there be debates, hesitations, committees? Or would the instinct be immediate? Help, protect, heal. So why was this cub different? Because he had claws? Because his mother had fur instead of words? Because he came from the forest instead of a home? Siku felt something rise inside her, not anger, not sadness, something older than both. Conviction. She walked into the room and sat beside the cub. For a moment, she just listened to him breathe. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a carved amulet, shaped like a bear, small enough to rest in her palm. It had been her grandmother's, a symbol of protection, strength. She laid it gently near the cub's side. "If we're wrong, we'll answer for it," she said quietly. "But if we're right, we'll have saved something sacred." That night she called a meeting, not of officials, not of outside experts, but of mothers. The cafeteria filled with women from the town, young and old, Inuit and non-Inuit, single mothers and grandmothers, teachers, nurses, volunteers. Siku stood in front of them and told them everything. The surveillance footage, the cub's condition, the weather delays, the agency warnings. Then she looked at them, steady and open. "I need to decide what happens next," she said. "But I won't decide alone." The room was silent. Then a voice from the back, soft but firm. "If a mother bear trusted you to save her child, do you really think she was wrong?" Another. "She chose life. Now we choose too." Another. "This is not about science. It's about responsibility." Siku listened, her heart heavy but clear. And when the room fell quiet again, she nodded. "Then we protect him," she said. "With everything we have." She contacted the authorities again, not to ask for permission, but to inform them. The cub would remain under care. He would be protected. And when it was safe, he would be transferred. Not sooner. Not under stress. Not like freight. The response was measured. The agency was cautious. But there was something in Siku's voice and the certainty, the quiet power, that made them pause. Sometimes leadership doesn't ask. It acts. And so, in that little Arctic town, with the storm raging outside, a decision was made not based on protocol, but on compassion. Siku returned to the recovery room that evening, long after the others had gone home. She sat by the cub, still barely the size of a large dog, and whispered stories. Stories her grandmother had told her. Of bears that walked like men. Of animals that dreamed. Of the long winter when compassion became the only fire left to warm a village. The cub didn't understand the words, but he understood the voice. He shifted slightly, pressed closer to the warmth, and for the first time Siku smiled without fear, because this wasn't just a decision about one life. It was a declaration that even in the wildest places, kindness still rules. And when instinct says stay away, but the heart says step closer, sometimes you follow the heart. The wind had quieted that night. After days of relentless snow, the air was eerily still, as if the storm had bowed its head, giving space for something greater to arrive. Inside the school, the lights glowed dimly through the frosted windows. The cub, now affectionately nicknamed Nanook, slept peacefully under the warmth of electric heaters and community love. His bandaged paw twitched occasionally in his dreams, but he no longer whimpered. He no longer cried. And then, it happened. 3:12 a.m., the perimeter alarm triggered. A soft ping, not loud, but urgent. The school's motion sensors had picked up movement at the edge of the yard. Siku, who had taken to sleeping in the teacher's lounge with a radio at her side, awoke instantly. She didn't panic. She simply got up, slipped on her boots, and walked silently toward the security room, heart pounding like a drum wrapped in snow. On the monitor, under the silver light of the Arctic moon, something moved. A large shadow. The bear had returned. She walked slowly, not like she was searching for food, not like she was confused or lost. She walked with direction, with purpose. She stopped near the same steps where she had left her cub 5 nights earlier. And then, she sat down, not on alert, not in aggression. She just sat, still, massive, watching, as if waiting for someone to come outside. Siku stared at the monitor, barely breathing. She switched on the exterior floodlight. The bear didn't flinch. She blinked once, looked up, and held her gaze directly into the camera. That was when Siku felt it, deep in her chest. Recognition. It wasn't just a wild animal, it was her, the mother, the one who had made the impossible choice, the one who had trusted them. And now, she was back. But not to reclaim, not to attack, to witness. Siku whispered into the radio. She's here. Within minutes, the school filled with quiet footsteps. Dr. Anaya, a few elders, 2 volunteers, and a ranger gathered in the hallway. No one raised their voice. No one grabbed a weapon. There was only reverence. They all stared at the screen. The bear didn't move. Her breath steamed in the cold. Her massive frame pulsed slowly with every inhale. She was waiting for something. Siku turned to the group. "I'm going outside." A protest rose in someone's throat, but she silenced it with a glance. Wrapped in layers, she stepped out into the night, the air like glass around her. The snow crunched under her boots. She moved carefully, respectfully, hands visible, posture calm. The bear turned her head slightly. Didn't rise, didn't growl, just watched. Siku stopped at the top of the stairs. Between them stretched 10 feet of silence. And in that space, thousands of years of instinct, fear, separation, and something else. Trust. Siku placed her hand over her chest, then slowly gestured toward the school. "He's alive," she said softly. "He's okay." The bear didn't understand the words, but she understood the moment. After a long, quiet pause, the bear stood. Siku froze. The others, watching from the window, held their breath. But the bear didn't charge. She didn't roar. She simply walked, slowly, powerfully, to the edge of the yard. She turned one last time, eyes glowing in the moonlight. And then, she vanished into the snow. Gone, the way she came. But this time with peace. The people inside exhaled. Some cried. Some smiled. Some just placed their hands over their hearts and whispered words in Inupiaq, ancient words of blessing and farewell. And inside, the cub stirred in his sleep, as if he had felt her presence. As if some tether between them had loosened, not broken, and now he was safe to dream without fear. If this moment moved you like it moved all of us, show your heart. Leave a like on this video so this story can reach more people who believe in the impossible. Sometimes all it takes is one small gesture, a paw at the door or a click of your thumb, to keep the light of compassion alive. After that night, Utqiagvik was never the same. No one spoke of the bear with fear anymore. Instead, her name was spoken with reverence. Not as a creature to be avoided, but as a mother who had done what so many humans might never have the courage to do. Trust. Children began drawing pictures of her. a large figure watching from the snow, always close, always calm. The cub, Nanook, became the town's shared guardian. People left food offerings near the woods, not out of pity, but out of respect. Dr. Anaya noted something remarkable in her journal. Since her return, the cub's heartbeat has normalized. His muscle tone is improving. His vocalizations are more frequent and curious. I don't know how, but I think he felt her near him again. And so did the people. Stories began to resurface. Old ones, forgotten ones, of human bear pacts, of times when humans and animals weren't divided by species, but united by instinct, protection, and something deeper, recognition. The elders spoke with a softness in their voices now. They called what happened Ivaluktuk, an ancient word meaning, when the wild remembers you. And Siku, she became more than a principle. She became the voice of a new kind of leadership, one that listened before reacting, that acted with heart before protocol, that believed in more than survival. It believed in connection. She visited Nanook every morning before the children arrived. Sometimes she read aloud. Sometimes she just sat in silence beside him. One morning, as she opened the door to his room, she found a surprise. The cub was no longer curled in the corner. He was sitting upright, blinking slowly, looking directly at her. His eyes were no longer clouded with fear. They were curious. He took one step forward, just one, and that was enough. It was as if something between them had been affirmed. As if everything she had done, the nights of uncertainty, the sleepless decisions, the public scrutiny, had finally come full circle in a single moment of eye contact. The cub wasn't hers, but he had been entrusted to her. And that bond, forged not by ownership but by care, was real. Elsewhere, news of the event had started to reach the outside world, but the town kept the story sacred. No viral videos, no interviews, just whispers. Gentle truths passed like campfire smoke, lingering, unforgettable. Hard to explain, but impossible to deny. People who had once dismissed animal emotion began to question their assumptions. People who had feared nature now wanted to understand it. And people who had once drawn clear lines between wild and civilized began to wonder if those lines were ever real at all. Because a bear came to a door, a cub was saved. And an entire village remembered that compassion is not a human invention. It's a force that lives in all beings, waiting for a chance to be seen. Spring came quietly to Utqiagvik. The snow softened. The sun lingered a few minutes longer each day. The cold still bit, but less cruelly. And Nanook, the cub once left for dead on a school doorstep, was no longer just surviving. He was thriving. His fur had thickened. His appetite returned. He had outgrown his crate, then the recovery room, then even the indoor enclosure built specially for him. Now he had been moved to a transitional pen outside the school, a safe space ringed with mesh and monitored around the clock. But even that, they knew, was temporary. He was never meant to stay. From the beginning, this had never been about taming him. It had always been about restoring him. And when the helicopter finally arrived, weeks after the storm had passed, there was no celebration, no banners, just quiet understanding. He was going home, not to his mother. She had not been seen again, but to where he belonged. The day of his transfer, the children lined the windows. They held signs they had painted by hand. Be brave, Nanook. Your mama is proud. You are always welcome here. Dr. Anaya guided him into the special transport crate. He resisted at first, not in fear, but in strength. He had grown. He was no longer the trembling, broken creature they had found. He was a survivor now. A wild thing, whole again. And Siku? She stood at the school doors once more, watching as the helicopter lifted gently into the pale morning sky. Her heart was heavy, but steady, because this was the right thing, the only thing. And as the sound of the blades faded, something settled over the town. A stillness not of loss, but of completion. They had answered a call that no one else heard. They had believed, when logic begged them not to. They had chosen love, when fear would have been easier. And in doing so, They had rewritten what it meant to live alongside nature. The cub had been saved, but so had they. Now we'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching this story from? And what do you believe? Was this a rare coincidence? Or something greater? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. Some stories are meant to entertain, others to teach. But once in a while, a story appears that does something more. It reminds us. It reminds us that compassion is not a weakness. It is a decision. That courage is not always loud, and sometimes it's a quiet paw print in the snow. And that trust, true trust, is the most radical act of all. What happened in Utqiagvik wasn't just an animal rescue. It was a revelation. A mother bear governed by instinct, driven by centuries of survival, chose to walk into human space. Not in aggression, not in fear, but in hope. She didn't roar at the doors. She didn't attack. She simply delivered her cub, wounded, wrapped, and trembling, to the very species that so often fails the wild. And she walked away. What makes us human is not our tools, not our buildings, not even our words. What makes us human is our capacity to recognize vulnerability and choose to protect it. And in that moment, the people of Utqiagvik remembered who they were. Not rulers of the land, not masters of nature, but guardians, guests, neighbors. And when the wild reached out, not with claws but with trust, they didn't look away. They answered. It would have been easier to follow protocol, to wait, to do nothing. But easy is not always right. Sometimes right is difficult, risky, unexplainable. Sometimes right is simply human. And if a bear can find the courage to entrust her child to us, maybe we can find the courage to be worthy of that trust. This was more than a rescue story. It was a reminder that the line between us and them is thinner than we think. And when we honor life, no matter how wild, no matter how silent, we honor something in ourselves, something ancient, something true. If this story touched something inside you, if it made you feel more connected, more awake, more human, then this is just the beginning. Because here, on this channel, we share more than just stories. We share truths the world forgets, about the animals who trust us, about the humans who rise to meet that trust, about the moments where instinct becomes emotion and survival becomes love. So if you haven't yet, subscribe. Be part of a growing family that believes in miracles hidden in fur, bravery born in silence, and the beauty of choosing kindness when no one's watching. And if you're ready for the next unforgettable journey, the story that's coming next will leave you breathless. Click the video now appearing on your screen to discover how a starving fox changed the life of a woman living alone on the edge of the world. It's real, it's powerful, and it's waiting for you. We'll see you there.